We should be prompted. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All righty. So we'll get started here. I think we have all the presenters. We have Winter, we have Amy. So, okay. Okay. So again, thank you everybody for joining us at the fourth information session that FNEMC has held on home renovations to increase energy efficiencies. We would like to start by just short introductions, but if you can put your first name, your last name, and the organization that you're from in the chat, that would be lovely, so we can have a recording as to who we're reaching, and if we can have, we want to reach out to all of BC and would like to increase the nations who join us here today. So you can introduce yourself in the chat, that would be great. We will keep this session as casual as possible, as the previous sessions have been. And we'll have a questions and answers section near the end. We will have a copy of this presentation. It will be made available following the session. I'll send an email to everybody that has come. And if anybody receives any technical or has any technical issues, you can send an email to me at crystaldixon@live.ca. And so, yeah, the first part of this webinar, we would like to continue these information sessions, and we would like to know what you would like to hear about. We developed a few of the selections. So I'll pull up this poll here. And then if there aren't any other topics that aren't listed and you would like to put those forward, you can put it in the chat as well. So I'm just going to pull up this poll here quickly. I'll leave it for about 30 seconds or so. So can everybody see that okay? Yeah? Okay. Okay, so we have 8 out of the 17 people. So just give it a few more moments here. A few more seconds here and then we will get started. So note that if any of the subjects that aren't in this poll, please feel free to put any suggestions that you would like to see for future topics for information sessions in the chat box, please. So we can take note of that for the next session. So I'll just end the poll here. And it looks like the top 2 are renovating community buildings for energy efficiency and capital planning 101. Kayasika for everybody participating in the poll. And I look forward to hosting more of these sessions. Okay, I'll stop sharing here. And oops. Okay, so I will start by introducing myself. If you don't know me, my name is Crystal Bookman. I'm the Energy Program Specialist with FNEMC, and my Haystach name is Dilpla Dudua, which means shining star. I am from Bella Bella, the Help Six Nation, and we've been in partnership with BC Hydro, Fortis BC, and the province of BC to support Indigenous communities in accessing the programs and resources to support their energy efficiency projects. I've been here for about a year and a half now, and it's been a pleasure to work with everybody here. And I'm really happy that we do have this, we've created this space here to share stories with everybody involved, the funders and the nations. And we would like to keep utilizing the spaces. I feel like it's really successful in how we learn together as people. And just so you know that we are working on our social media presence. In the future, we will be having a LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, so we could share different funding opportunities. And it will be funding opportunities, energy program specialists only, with an exception of some FNEMC projects that we would like to share out. But we would like to thank our partners, and going into this next slide here, I think I'll go one slide up. We have our team here, so if everybody can wave as they say your name. As my name is Crystal, and the next person is Seth Oldham from BC Hydro here. Winter from BC Hydro. Sorry, I can't say your last name and I don't want to. Yeah. Okay, so Winter. Is Winter here? Yeah. Amy Seabrook. And Carol Suhan. Diane Roper from Fortis BC. Miranda Rio Green from Emily from the province of BC. Devin Miller, who will be joining us today, and will be presenting on Indigenous Community Energy Coach, and Corey Cote from Indigenous Clean Energy Organization. So, Gaia Sika, for everybody for taking your time out to help with the this information session and really sharing the information with the nations that are in the room today. So going into the agenda, just on the welcome, and I will be going through, we have a little bit more of a presentation here, so we'll be going up to 125. I do want to have a nations dialogue with some questions that we would like to ask some of the nations. Not to put you guys on the spot, but it would be great to hear some of the stories that you have with some of the success that you have within your nation, and to share the knowledge with the people in the room here. So the next one at 150, we'll have Musqueam's Energy Efficiency Initiative, which Isan and his team will be presenting, and we'll have time for questions and answers at 2:10, and then we'll be closing at 2:30. We're not quite sure if we'll use the time. It would be good to have, depending on how the discussions go today. So yes, so here we go into this section here. I will pass it over to Winter.
Great. Thanks, Crystal, and thanks everyone for joining in. I just wanted to, wanted to briefly preface this information session with a bit of information and just some backgrounds. Can everybody hear me?
Sorry.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, sorry, it was me. I apologize.
Okay, we're good to go? Fantastic. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, like I said, I just wanted to preface this information session with a bit of knowledge around energy efficiency as it relates to homes. This slide gives a bit of backgrounder as to the kinds of benefits that can be derived from retrofit projects in housing, specifically and focused on improving home energy efficiency. So yeah, it's very, I would say, very important to take into consideration all of the benefits for energy efficiency projects. Considering that energy efficiency typically has a pretty high upfront cost, as you are all aware. However, when we take into consideration all of the benefits, the return on investment tends to be positive over time. So first, just talking about the direct impacts that come in the form of improvements in like housing that is experienced by residents, as well as the kinds of economic activity that arises from renovation, renovating homes and improving homes with upgrades and whatnot. So in building green, we typically see a boost in employment, as well as in personal skills related to construction and trades, in addition to other adjacent industries. And this is, I would say, very important as we're experiencing currently a shortage in building specialists, and this issue is probably going to exacerbate as the demand for green buildings increases. In addition to that, energy literacy is another direct impact, and it is a benefit as since energy literacy is, it just comes directly out of the people that are involved in such projects. And then once these upgrades have been installed, the kinds of direct impacts that we experience materialize in the physical enhancements to the home's durability and weather resistance and resilience, which is especially important in a changing climate. And then it's also worth mentioning that it's proven to reduce household costs through reduction in energy bills and as well as overall maintenance. What is less known than the direct benefits are what are called the indirect and induced impacts. And these are benefits that they compound over time. It's not benefits that you experience right away like you would with a direct impact. So they're not experienced immediately, but broadly speaking, they do contribute to things like stable workforces over time, as well as a local and strong economy, especially as we experience a transition into a green economy. Of course, we're also looking at experiencing improvements in environmental conservation and sustainability, and then more locally, especially for residents' health and wellness benefits that accompany energy efficiency upgrades. Indigenous Clean Energy, they published a Energy Foundations report recently, I think, it looks like in 2021, that provides more information and context to these energy benefits. So if you wanted to read into it more, then that report can be found online. Next slide, please. So with all of that in mind, the main thing I think we want to consider when building energy efficient homes is how do we maximize these benefits that I had mentioned? And the way typically that is best understood is through the kind of building approaches we take into consideration in making these investments. So the building approach that I wanted to briefly discuss is HAAS, housing as a system, which is a term to describe the interdependencies between a home's main components, being the outer layer or building envelope, the inner parts or mechanical systems, the occupants, as well as their lifestyles and the environment or the territory or where that home is specifically located. So, I mean, a good example is when we're making upgrades to a home and we're trying to fix like a drafty home and its air leakage. We also have to take into consideration the home's insulation and ventilation to manage any kind of potential issues that might arise from making those upgrades, such as moisture and humidity within the home that might not be something that is expected. So I just wanted to briefly talk about those two slides. That's it for my brief intro. And then I'll pass it over to Crystal if you want to introduce the programs that we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, thank you, Winter. Everybody knows that there are many programs to support First Nations in improving the energy efficiency of existing homes in their communities. The three that we're going to highlight, or the four that we're going to highlight today, are the ICCP, the Indigenous Communities Conservation. Can you hear me okay? Conservation Program with BC Hydro and Fortis BC, Clean BC Indigenous Community Heat Pump Incentive Program with the province of BC, and Clean BC Income Qualified Program with the province of BC, and Bringing It Home Project Accelerator with the Indigenous Clean Energy Organization. So we'll hand this back to Winter again.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so quickly, just intro into the Indigenous Communities Conservation Program, which is a program that we at BC Hydro deliver in collaboration with Fortis BC, and it's intended to support Indigenous communities in the province in supporting their home energy efficiency upgrades and endeavors. So there are two components to this program. The first one, the one on the slide, is the Home Energy Checkup, where we offer free energy saving products, salary support to hire community members who will then install these products, and then also training for community members and staff to install the products. And then we also do a home condition assessment and project management training module. So yeah, those are the three main components of the Home Energy Checkup. It's an entirely free offer, so we recommend that communities do take advantage of it. It's a great opportunity, first of all, to receive the products, but then also to take stock of the condition and to do an assessment of the condition of the homes in your community. That's super vital in case the community is looking for opportunities or needs to make improvements in like more structural, larger upgrades. Next slide, please. And yeah, that takes me to the second offer with an ICCP, being the home energy upgrade rebates, which we offer rebates for a number of upgrades, being, they include retrofit enabling upgrades, so remediation to damage for mold or mildew. We also offer building envelope upgrades, including attic and basement insulation, windows and doors, equipment and appliances, so fridges and freezers, heat pumps, other primary space heating and water heating. So the rebate amounts that you see on the slide, they're broken down per category, and they are the max amount per home, and they've also increased recently. So on the bottom, you'll see that the numbers are effective June of this year. Next slide. Yeah, speaking of which, we just wanted to emphasize that these rebates are focused on supporting building envelope upgrades and replacing old appliances and equipment with more efficient ones. So if your community is interested in receiving these rebates, we want to make sure that you're reaching out to the right organization. Since BC Hydro primarily works with homes that are electrically heated, at the same time, Clean BC and Fortis both offer similar rebates for homes that are like going through fuel switching or that have a gas hookup. And then finally, we just wanted to mention that if you are planning on participating in ICCP or the related programs, please make sure that you check the product requirements and just make sure that the products that you're ordering, as well as the contractors or the suppliers that you're dealing with, are on the same page as you, and that you understand kind of the details, like the terms and conditions and stuff. We want to make sure that communities aren't missing any funding opportunities. That's definitely something we want to avoid. And yeah, if you have any questions or if you'd like to know more about any of the program offers, I'm happy to answer your questions. Or if you want to reach out to or connect to any of the reps on the call, then yeah, we can help you out. So that's it for me. That's ICCP, and I'll pass it over back to Crystal. Thank you.
Jessica Winter. Not quite sure if you want to pause or if we have any questions, but we will have questions at the very end. Oh, yes. Okay, we'll stop. Stephen.
Hi, thank you. Stephen McGlenn from LaCamel First Nation. I really appreciate the information. I guess my question is more higher level, just about the nature of the funding agreements themselves. How can we, my struggle has been, understanding what our community needs and trying to fit our needs within what what organizations are willing to fund. So I guess I just want to suggest like the more flexibility and recognition of Indigenous governments in their ability to spend money as they see fit for their energy efficiency needs. Because yeah, it's been really hard for us to fit what we need into what organizations are offering, I guess, if that makes sense. So just, I guess, a comment, just we're always looking for more flexibility. And I guess just that kind of core operational funding that nations need to advance these projects. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We have noted. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, just want to thank Stephen for his comments. And so at the First Nations Energy and Mining Council, we're hearing a similar sentiment from other nations. And actually, I don't know if you attended, Stephen, but Crystal put on a really good session that was focused on remote communities maybe 2 months ago. And as part of that session, we did discuss how the remote community funding in particular is being approached with a much more flexible lens from both NRCan and BC and the benefit to that approach. And so I think it's great that you're raising it here today, and want to welcome BC Hydro or Fortis to respond to your comments if there's any thought at their level being provided.
Yeah, sorry, Amy here from BC Hydro. Thanks for your comments, Stephen. Appreciate you voicing that. And it is something, it is very top of mind for us, both Fortis and BC Hydro and the province, when we're designing these programs. One thing that Sarah referred to, the partnership in our remote communities, or for BC Hydro's non-integrated area, we have a joint program that's administered by the New Relationship Trust called the Community Energy Diesel Reduction Program. And I don't think it's too premature for me to say that we're looking to do the same thing for grid connected communities. So both the utilities and the province have started discussions around how we bring these programs together into more of like a one-stop shop or one window approach for nations, recognizing the capacity issues in communities and just the complexity of the programs. Having to navigate multiple programs is difficult. I appreciate that. So we're working on it. More news to come. But yeah, appreciate your comments.
Yes, thank you very much. And are there any further comments or questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide here, which is Devin Miller.
Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for having me here today. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, got a thumbs up. Excellent. Yeah, so my name is Devin Miller. I am the Clean BC Indigenous Community Energy Coach. And I just have a couple slides today. I'll just give it a brief overview of 2 Clean BC programs that are currently available to Indigenous communities seeking to undertake energy efficiency work. So the first program is this one that you see on your screens. It's the Indigenous Community Energy Coach Program and Heat Pump Incentive, which is the program that I run. The program provides energy coaching services to support Indigenous communities that want to take advantage of this heat pump incentive and related energy efficiency offers. So you might wonder what that means in terms of coaching. That can look like a lot of different things. That can be help in navigating the various funding programs that are available out there. It can be in helping to sort of prioritize or discuss phasing of work and offer recommendations there, and just to help sort of navigate the whole process for you. And then there's also the heat pump incentive. So the funding is for fuel switching from fossil fuel heating to electric air source heat pumps primarily. There's two funding streams. The first is for residential buildings. It covers up to 80% of the sort of what we call eligible installation costs. And for homes that are switching from fossil fuel heat, so that would be sort of propane or natural gas or oil, that would be a maximum of $12,000 per residential heat pump. For homes that are looking to switch from wood stoves, it's a slightly lower rebate, so it would be a maximum of $3,500 for a mini split heat pump, or a maximum of $6,500 for a central heat pump system. And then there's also a community building stream. So I noticed in the earlier poll, there was interest in sort of community building projects. So I guess this is pertinent to that. There is a community building stream that provides funding up to 80% as well of the installed costs, and up to $200,000 total per community building heat pump. And overall, communities can access a total of $200,000 per fiscal year. So one application per fiscal year. Many communities have done this. If they have large multi-year projects, they come back each fiscal year for an additional application, and that is allowed, but it's limited to one per fiscal year. So that's the really quick high level of that program. And then on the next slide, please. The next program that I'll provide an overview of is called the Clean BC Income Qualified Program. So this program is available province-wide, including Indigenous communities, and the program provides funding support for a wider variety of energy efficiency upgrades, including heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, insulation, and windows and doors. The maximum rebates for these measures are noted on the slide there. So up to $9,500 for windows and doors, up to $5,500 for insulation, up to $9,500 for heat pumps, and up to $3,500 for heat pump water heaters. And there's no maximum rebate per home, just a maximum rebate per measure. So often refer to this program as the IQP program, the Income Qualified Program. Additional rebates are also available for health and safety measures. So for example, pest or mold remediation, ventilation measures. So for example, bathroom fans or heat recovery ventilators, and electrical panel upgrades are also available when those upgrades are completed in association with the heat pump or heat pump water heater installation or windows and doors measure. Eligible housing types include single-family homes, duplexes, townhomes, manufactured or mobile homes on a permanent foundation, and secondary suites and single-family homes that are individually metered. And so more broadly, while proof of income is collected under the program more broadly, this is not a requirement for Indigenous communities, and Indigenous communities qualify for level 1 rebates, which you see on the top left of this slide, cover 95% of project costs up to a maximum per measure. And the last piece, or sort of notable piece of this program that I want to mention, is that it's a contractor-based retrofit program. And so what that means is that rebates are paid to the contractors, and the equivalent amount in dollars are deducted from the participant's invoice. So this really makes it a more user-friendly and sort of reduces some of the upfront costs that need to be paid by a participant. And that's it for me. Just a quick overview of the Clean BC programs. I believe my contact information will be shared later, but I'll put it in the, here it is in the chat. And I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up as you're contemplating accessing these programs. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Devin. Do we have any questions for Devin? Okay, we can come back to this one at the very end if anybody has any questions. You could also use the chat as well. So yeah, so next we have here the Nations Dialogue. So this is I wanted to create a space so that we can start sharing a little bit more about, our experiences when it comes to the funding applications that are put through, the planned projects that are taking place within the nation. So I would like to take this time. I want to keep this very open. So feel free to take a stab at one of these questions here, or if you'd like to just share the knowledge and experience that you have with some of the projects that you are working on, feel free to unmute yourself and we can have some dialogue here. And if it's easier, maybe we can start with the number one question here, how the lead went about, so how you went about planning upgrades to existing homes in your community. Go ahead, Sarah.
Okay, so I should let you know too, Crystal, that today there's a for the coastal First Nations, they're having their remote community climate action coordinator retreat. So unfortunately, at least for the Haida Nations and a few others, and I work closely with the Haida Nations, they couldn't attend today. But Holly Johnson, who's the Skidegate Band Council's climate action coordinator, she asked me to share a few things with her recent experience, and I know BC Hydro staff were up there recently too. So one of the things that Holly's been learning that she wanted to share is that, so she's currently putting in an application through the Greener Homes Grant, and we're trying to work, Holly's working in collaboration with Old Massett Village Council on the North End. And what we learned was that many audits were actually performed a couple years ago up in Old Massett in particular. And there was no, what we're calling an implementation plan to go along with the audit application. So, in dialogue with our team, what we really discussed was, prior to submitting an application to Greener Home Grant or any other funds for to cover the cost of audits, let's make sure, if we're working with a certain contractor or individual to help write that proposal, that along with the application for the audits, we have a solid implementation plan. So what will we do with the information once it's received? Who will be the project manager? Who are the potential contractors? What's the timeline look like? Do we have, how will we access additional funding to actually implement those recommendations? And by ensuring that we have a proper implementation plan in place, then it really reduces the risk that those audits will go stale, because I think they only last about 2 years. Anyone from government or Hydro or Fortis, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're only good for 2 years. So that was a real lesson learned up on Haida Gwaii recently that I know Holly wanted to share.
Thank you very much, Sarah. If you don't have any further comments on that, if any of the partners would like to respond. I know this part is fairly new, so I know if you are shy, please feel free to use the chat. Okay, Stephen, go ahead.
Thanks. I don't want to take up too much time. I guess just from our experience in LaCamel, we're really taking a higher level perspective on energy efficiency and energy management, and really advancing it from a position of rights and title, and that that there are things happening, I guess, at a global level. Canada is making commitments at a global level, and certainly climate change is undeniable at this point, and there's a real urgency behind this transition. And so just in a lot of our just for the other nations benefit, in a lot of our discussions with the Crown or with Crown corporations or agencies like BC Hydro, we're really saying that we can't, as Indigenous communities, we can't be left behind, and that transition is happening, and we're already far behind because of the Indian Act and because of colonization, and we need we need that support, and we need that sort of unfettered core operational funding to be able to catch up to where other governments and local governments are, and hopefully leapfrog forward to a more innovative approach to housing. So there's, I guess, a governance piece to all this that LaCamel is really pushing, and trying to advance it from a rights and title perspective. And we've found some success in advancing, relationships and even funding. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I think nations should be speaking that language. I think it's helpful and it's needed. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was some very wise words there, and I really do agree with you there, Jessica, for sharing your knowledge and making those comments. So next we have Cookie. Sorry if I said that wrong, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Stephen had said. For the most part, First Nations, and especially in the rural and remote communities, they don't have access to a lot of the information that the urban First Nations receive. And because they're so rural and remote, there's an issue around connectivity that by the time they receive information, you have a very small window to apply for any funds that either are coming from ISK or any other delegated agency to support First Nations communities, which really is unfair, because the federal government provides funds in the millions to delegated agencies on behalf of the First Nations people, which makes no sense to me. They give the money to a delegated agency and tell the delegated agency, you can now start to accept proposals from First Nations communities, which, it just blows my mind. Here I am, a rural and remote community, struggling with the homes that ISK had built, and then having to reach out to a subcontractor for renovation projects. It's exactly what Stephen is talking about. Why is it we have to go through all these other funders? Why not just give the core funding to the First Nations? Because it just doesn't work when we have to apply for renovations for mold, for example. We have to apply to a totally different group, or when we want solar panels, we have to apply for funds through a totally separate group. It's exactly the way we're being treated in the education system. Our children, we send them to public school, we get a nominal roll list, and we check a box and say, yep, those are all students here. And then all of a sudden, ISK issues a check to the school district. And once that check hits the school district, our kids start getting kicked out of school. They hold on to that money, and that's almost exactly the same thing that's happening with these major delegated agencies that are saying they're receiving millions for First Nations water systems, for example. Oh, and by the way, you have to apply and you have to qualify. In the rural and remote communities, probably 80% of the time, they don't qualify. And to be honest, it's because they don't have a proposal writer that can really support that First Nations community. Nobody should be getting left behind with this, because this is something that ISK, INAC, ANSI, whatever you want to go by, they put us in this position. The federal government put us on these small little rock pile reserves and expect us to survive. And we're dealing with saturated foundations, saturated communities. We're also dealing with climate change. Let's pile everything else up on top of this, and then, okay, now what can we do to help you? Come on now. It's just sad to see these other corporations receiving millions of dollars on behalf of First Nations communities, and these First Nations communities don't have the capacity to fill out for the funds, what happens? What happens to the millions that they don't spend? You know, I hear it on a regular basis. Oh yeah, the federal government's putting $50 million into, you know, let's, for example, you know, wastewater. All right, yeah, we're getting $50 million. Yes, now what can we do? How can we improve it? Oh, we have to apply and we have a 1-week window. Are you kidding me? You know, give the funding to the First Nations people that can utilize it. Because this whole system that they have, it's not working. And I don't think it ever will until you give the authority back to the First Nations people to look after their communities. Stop treating us like we're residential school kids, for crying out loud. Thank you.
Bayasika and thank you for, you know, putting those and speaking for the nation and your role. I would like to invite any of the presenters to respond if you'd like.
Just to say thanks for sharing that. I don't have a response.
Bayasika. Yeah, so one of the things that I do really believe is that with the advocation and mentorship, like for instance, I have my background as an administrative assistant, and our partners and FNEMC have lined me up with some really good mentors who are in the room right now, and her name is Sarah Ozog and Trisha Thomas, and they've really helped guide me through with this position and having the connections with the nations. I think that is one step forward for me. In my view, I know there's a bigger picture out there when it comes to what the communities are going through, but as an Indigenous woman, I really believe that this is one step forward, and we should, you know, take that model of mentorship and finding the people to be in the same room and to increase the knowledge here, because, you know, as a person, I don't want to go too deep, but I know what the colonial system has put upon me and put upon my people, and I really thank you for sharing those words. And I think with closing those gaps, it's going to take some time for us to get there, but I think it's for the partners and for the nations to share their experiences the closer we get to closing those gaps. So I ask you for sharing, and we'll go on to the next person, Sean.
Hi, thanks for that, Crystal. Excuse me, I just want to say I wholeheartedly agree with Cook B. Robbins' comments and the struggles for remote and rural First Nations. I work for the Silpatine National Government. We're, I believe, neighbors of Cook B. Robbins, and I know our communities struggle with accessing a lot of this. These programs tend to benefit the more communities with more capacity, and I think there needs to be more funding and access to capacity building for the smaller communities to be able to catch up. But I also want to thank those that are on this webinar for sharing and helping, trying to inform us on what is available out there so that we can try to work towards those goals. I have a number of questions on these programs. I think the first question that comes to mind is home ownership. So are these programs based on who owns the home? So an example would be, most of our communities, the homes are owned by the First Nation. Therefore, would they only qualify to renovate or get the funding for one home, or could they potentially qualify for any homes they need to renovate? I think that's a big question, because sometimes that's an issue. If it's on the meter number, that can also be a number or an issue, because sometimes we have a hard time getting information from the occupants of the home on you know, what's the hydro information on who actually pays the hydro bill. So I think just starting kind of with that one would be a good. I have a number more questions too.
Maybe I can take a first stab at it. I think the answer will be maybe slightly different depending on the programs, but thanks for the question. It's a good one. From the is Devin Miller with the Clean BC programs. So the main determinant, like the Indigenous Community Energy Coach program and heat pump incentive is designed to be quite flexible. So it's pretty low barrier to access, and really as long as the community supports the project, that's, you know, good enough for us regardless of ownership of the homes. More broadly speaking, to your question around is it set up to fund sort of bulk multi-home installations? Absolutely. I think I could say that broadly to all the programs. That's how they're set up to go through the community and access so upgrades to multiple homes. So maybe that's an initial response, and if you have any follow-up questions, please let me know if I haven't fully answered your question.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. I think that's great news. That kind of ties into the next question. Our communities, we have 4 of 6 communities are out on Highway 20 west of the Fraser, and that hydro grid is terrible. We've had times where there's been 7-day power outages. We have brownouts. It's really hard on appliances and stuff like that. Our communities, we've done a lot of work, research on what they'd like to see as far as changes to their housing. Eliminating wood stoves was one of the top things that they wanted to see gone or changed. But the reality is, if we eliminate a wood stove and we put in a heat pump or something like that, number one, it's relying on a grid that isn't very good. So we could potentially have long power outages where there's no heating. Number two is, how reliable will they be with the number of brownouts we get and electronics frying and stuff? And that's same thing goes with the heat pump hot water tanks and all that other stuff. So we're kind of and I think a lot of the remote communities are dealing with that issue as well of how do we do that? I don't know if the heat pump coaching program would help communities figure out an alternative. We're not our favorite option, but we're looking at generator backups as a potential. Solar would be really good, but it's just difficult to get into that piece. The other question I had was contractor qualifications. At the Silcoteen National Government, where we started our own construction department. I'm a Red Seal carpenter myself, just finishing my energy advisor certification.
Right.
Our manager for that department is Red Seal, and all our leads are Red Seal. So they're all well qualified people, and we're all our members that are working in there are all apprentices going through the apprenticeship program. Does the contractors, because I think some of these programs pay the contractor, does the contractor have to register or be certified somehow with these programs in order for the communities to hire them and qualify for the rebates?
Both great questions. I'll try to answer them in sequence. I think the first one was around sort of power quality and power surges and stuff, which is good of you to acknowledge. That's definitely an issue. And certainly I think while I can understand the wood stove piece that you mentioned, having a reliable backup source of power is a good idea. Certainly if you have power quality issues and power outages. And one thing to keep in mind with the heat pumps is you can get called surge protectors, which would help in the case of brownouts or something like that if you were to install, but certainly happy to discuss that further with you if you're interested. And I broadly think that having a backup power source is a good idea if the power grid is an issue, if you're switching to heat pumps. And then the second question was around eligible contractors. Yeah, so there is what's called a program registered contractor list, or the Home Performance Contractor Network. That is required for some programs that you use a contractor off that list. It is possible to get on that list, and there's training that perhaps Amy or others can speak to. I'm not sure what the specifics are on that, but you can get on that list, absolutely. It's not required to access all the programs, but for some of the programs, for all of them, it's certainly recommended, but not required for all programs.
Yeah, I can jump in. Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Sean, for your questions. Nice to see you. It's been a few years, but I remember visiting you at one point to talk about housing. I guess just a quick recap on your questions that you asked to Devin's earlier point. We do for both Fortis and BC Hydro, the utility programs. They are intended to serve every home in your community, any home in your community. It's really the nation's purview to tell us where you're doing the work and where you need the support. So they're broadly open. Even in fact, too, if you were going to be doing renovations for any community members living off reserve, they would be open to that. Or we're open to that as well. Yeah, the reliability issues is certainly something we hear with rural and remote communities. I don't have a quick and easy answer for you there. As Devin said, like we'd certainly encourage you to have a source of backup heat in areas where you are prone to brownouts and outages, especially if they're multi-day. And then, as Devin said, with the heat pumps, we have seen communities look at surge protection of the panel or for the heat pump to help kind of protect the equipment in the event of a power quality issue. And then lastly, just on the contractor front, yeah, the utility programs will work with your contractors. So we don't have a requirement that you work with sort of registered contractors that are registered for our other programs, but we'd like to kind of move in that direction and support the contractors that you're working with or that nations are working with in getting training and becoming registered if they're interested in that. Really just looking to support quality installations in the communities. So right now, we know that these kind of registered contractors, program qualified contractors, they're harder to find in rural and remote communities, which is why we don't have that requirement in the program. So hopefully that's take a crack at your questions. Thanks for them.
Yeah, thanks, Devin. Thanks, Amy. Good to see you again. Yeah, I think that the great answers. I think having a contractors list. I understand the idea behind it and making sure there's quality work being done, but even like I live in Williams Lake, just outside of Williams Lake. I'm doing a major energy upgrade to my own home, and finding the right contractor. There's not that many locally to choose from, and by the time you pay somebody to come from out of town, you've basically lost the money that you're going to get through the rebate, so it becomes pointless. So I think that's another problem that I think a lot of these are rural and remote communities are going to struggle with is, yeah, maybe they'll qualify for this, but then they can't find a contractor that's going to do it. And if they do, the costs are going to be so much greater that they might as well not even apply for the funding. So sometimes chasing the money ends up costing us more money. So I think these are things that we have to be aware of, and maybe hopefully BC Hydro and Fortis can bend the rules a little bit, or at least find ways to make local contractors for all our First Nations easier to qualify or find a way to quickly get them qualified.
Thank you very much, Sean. We do have another question here with hands up. Jordan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've been fortunate to access a few of these programs and been successful, marginally successful with almost all of them, the exception of greener homes. But I did want to talk about, because one of the challenges that we faced was just accessing the information on families' BC Hydro accounts, and that it took us a lot of coordination just to get a list that was accurate. And what kind of frustrated me about that was that we were giving up this information. We weren't really explaining how that information was going to be used. And I wanted to know if the cost of this program is being assessed based on the current gains made by the selling electricity at this to really inefficient really inefficient households, and how much of the bad debt has accrued compared to how much this programming is costing. Because I worry many families that I've worked with have their energy insecurity largely because I'm in like an urban sort of setting, largely around just the cost of energy and bad debt that's been accrued in the community. And I'm wondering if we're going to be assessing these projects on their kind of their financial stability of homes. Does that make sense? Or am I just rambling? I wrote all this down and then I kind of riffed. I'll put my camera off so you can see me. Yeah, that's my question.
I can actually, I don't think I totally understand the question you're asking, Jordan. Sorry. Could you
Yeah.
rephrase maybe?
What puts a lot of the families that I work with in energy insecurity is just the cost of operating a really low efficiency home.
Yeah.
We're giving up this BC Hydro billing information, not really even the bills, just like having to submit BC Hydro account numbers. And I'm wanting to know how much the allowance of bad debt changes over time to make further cases about investing into these technologies. Because I worry that the incentive for these programs will dry up if they're not recovering anything from the success of the project.
I see, like in terms of reducing how much energy is being used in the home, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly, that's bad for business, right? Right, BC Hydro's not going to make as much money off these communities if their homes are too efficient.
Right. Amy here with BC Hydro. I feel like that's a pretty complex question, Jordan, but thanks for it. I mean, hydro is a regulated utility. We have to do demand side management as a regulated utility. It's a requirement. So, and there's a strong business case for BC Hydro to be doing energy efficiency. The cheapest energy we can make is the energy we've already made and that you can save in your home. It helps defer the costs of things like substation upgrades and new infrastructure. So it's something that is for the utilities a very strong business case. So I wouldn't worry about the funding drying up, though I hear you. It's the nature of programs and program funding that you would think that way. I would say that's not the case for the utilities anyway, that our funding is lasting for energy efficiency. And then beyond that, I mean, that's why we got into demand side management in the first place. But now layer on, climate action and our commitment to reconciliation and all of that. There are a lot of other benefits, like, that Winter spoke to at the beginning of this session, both for nations and for utilities and for governments in pursuing this work together. So I don't see it going anywhere. I don't know if I can speak to the sort of the debt discussion in the home. That was a bit over my head, to be honest. But yeah, I just wanted to assure you that energy efficiency is a very strong business case for us. And in terms of like the money that gets put into these projects from the utilities, I mean, we do claim energy savings on those projects, and it's something that we evaluate our programs from time to time to confirm those energy savings, and we might adjust, how we forecast those savings over time. But there are savings, generally speaking, with the types of upgrades that we're supporting. And that's maybe why we're a bit tricky to work with at times, is because we have requirements around, if you take this out and put this in, we know there's savings attached to that. That's why we support that through our program. Maybe I'll leave it there. Sorry if that was long-winded.
No, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you for your question. Could you go ahead? We have enough for maybe one more question, and then we'll have Musqueam present after this question.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Thank you. Forgive my bluntness, but I just want to again. I'm wondering about the energy efficiency of the homes that were built 50 years ago. Prior to all of these other programs and this national reconciliation piece. Well, we've been trying to in rural and remote communities, remove old homes. There's radon because there's no foundation. You know, there's mold because there's no, it's not properly sealed in certain areas around. And then we have this huge saturation of bad septic planning from ISK. You know, and again, when we applied for these programs for housing, ISK said, okay, we approve, but we get to select a contractor, and they gave it to the lowest bidder. They always went to the lowest bidder, who nickel and dimed on everything, from copper wires to you know, plastic septic pipes to, you know, everything. They nickel and dimed everything, and now we're dealing with the fallout of my whole reserve here. Well, about 80% of IR1 is all saturated in sewage. If you dig down 15 feet, you're going to hit a sewage bed. They call it black gold. You know, and it's unfortunate that we don't have other places to build. You know, and that's where my frustration's coming from. You know, the past injustice that nobody's willing to talk about or deal with. And now we're dealing with the fallout. Here we are 50 years later, and I want to put in a proper septic system, and they're throwing feasibility in my face. Feasibility in my face. Well, we've done that time and time again, but they're not willing to foot the bill to fix the problem that they made. You know, I really get a sense, I fully understand now when people talk about Turkey Creek and the impact of their water system by a proponent. And we're doing the same thing, but the proponent is the people that were supposed to be looking after us, providing us with safe homes. And 50 years ago, they didn't know about saturation. They thought the drainage field was going to be fine. But when you cram 130 homes on 7-8 hectares, this is what you get. And it's not the fault of my housing department or previous chiefs and councils. It's the policies that were developed from the federal government. Well, if you want to build a home, you have to build a subdivision of 10 homes. And they all have to be tied into the same system to be more effective, efficient. Well, yeah, we did all of that. You know, we crowded all the T's and dotted all the I's, and now we're dealing with the fallout of badge engineering from 50 years ago. So this problem is probably not just our problem. I'm sure there are other First Nations that are having to deal with it. You know, and I'm sorry if I came across as really harsh and blunt, but sometimes that's the way you have to be heard. Because I'm speaking on behalf of 135 homes and well over 500 people. You know, and I just get so frustrated because there seems to be proponent after proponent or delegated agency after delegated agency. I'm getting emails saying you can now qualify, you can now apply for these funds for energy efficient homes. You can now apply for, but how the hell am I supposed to apply for that when I can't even fix the problems that are existing right now? You know, so that's the frustration that comes out. And you know, I've met with ISK, you know, 3 times in the past 2 years. Each time I even invited them to my community, and they came out, but they sent their engineers, and you know, they weren't the decision makers. We'll take your information and we'll get back to you. We'll take your information, we'll get back to you. I've been hearing that for 4 years. You know, nobody really wants to try and fix the problem. And I have to start looking at other means. I'm starting to utilize own source revenue. And it's just getting to a point now where I'm running out of own source revenue just to fix the problems that I have. Because, you know what, I can't wait 2 years for a feasibility study to be approved when septic's backing up in 4 homes. You know, so therein lies the frustration, and I just hope that we can find a solution here. You know, I really like Stephen's idea, provide the First Nations with the funding to fix the problem and hire the proper people rather than having to apply with different delegated agencies for different projects, you know, clean energy projects, septic projects, you know, it just gets so overwhelming for my housing department. And I only have 3 people down there working in that department. So it just gets overwhelming, and they, you know, they're overworked and underpaid, and so am I. Basically, is how it is for rural and remote communities. And I just want everybody on the call here to remember that when they talk about making things better for First Nations people. Thank you.
Yes, I asked Sika for all of that. I would like to, you know, I do thank you for sharing your comments, and know that you are heard. And I think with what we can do, we will try. And I think with partners in the room, they could hear what's going on down in the grassroots, which is great. And yeah, if you do have any other plans and would like to know more, I am here also. I will be sharing my contact information after, but go ahead, Sarah, if you have a few comments. And then we'll go into Hassan's
Yeah, once again, really want to recognize Cookbee's concerns that he's raising. And, you know, not only are they heard, but I think we do have some channels where we can start to ensure that not only are we hearing those comments, but that they're being raised to the appropriate levels and to decision makers. So Cookbee, I know you were a part of that May 2nd Regional Energy and Resource Table session that FNEMC hosted last week. And I raised that because I don't believe we have anyone from the federal government here with us today, but I do see we have representation from the province of BC. And where that's important is because as part of these regional tables, which is intending to be a tripartite table between the province, the federal government, and then First Nations organizations, there was communication and discussion on that May 2nd workshop of energy efficiency and improving energy efficiency in rural and remote communities. So I really would like to recognize our Miranda, I see you there from Emily. You know, I do understand that there is perhaps sub-working groups or points of contact that NRCan and the provincial government have established already for some of these specific areas. I'm not sure who those primary contacts are. Miranda, not looking for you to offer any names today, but I think it's important that as part of that initiative, you know, we ensure that our federal counterparts as part of that table hear these concerns, and we begin to identify points of contact and, you know, possibly plans for how these concerns can be addressed. Miranda, anything to offer, or anyone from BC?
Sorry, just trying to take it all in. Let me get back to you.
I'm also here. Hi everyone.
Oh, hey Katja.
From the province. Hey. I've been listening and taking notes and thinking about how all of this is you know, stuff that we've been thinking about, trying to simplify both. Sorry, there's a very, very loud bang. simplify both like our funding programs, but also working to align funding so that we don't sort of have these very compartmentalized buckets of funding. And as Sarah mentioned, we do sit on various tables with our federal colleagues. So yeah, we will definitely share this more broadly with our colleagues who work more in policy, and then Miranda and I are more kind of on the program side, but definitely really appreciative of all the comments, and yeah, looking forward to having more conversations as well.
Yeah.
So why don't I'll action myself and the First Nations Energy and Mining Council that we will work through that RET table with the federal and provincial counterparts to again share what was raised at this session and identify a point of contact with the BC government and the federal government that have been made aware of the importance of alignment for funding initiatives, because we're hearing it from all places that too many different funding initiatives. Why isn't it being streamlined? We don't have the resources, time, capacity to keep up with you know what's being offered, and I'll put that in quotes because there's too many hurdles to often access it. So that I'll action FNEMC with that task, and we'll put that as part of the report out.
So we do have, let's see, time check here. We have 15 minutes left. We do have two other presenters. We have Hassan, which he'll be sharing his view on or his projects that he's been successful at. I'm not quite sure if Norman has joined us, but there is one more 10-minute presentation, or maybe 5 minutes, with ICE. And what was her name? Andrea? Is that her name, Amy?
Larissa.
Larissa, sorry, Larissa. Will be after this, so we can go over time if people do have time. If you need to leave a bit earlier, then I will be sending out this video as well. So I would like to respect the time of the presenters and thank them for taking the time. So we will go with Hassan from Musqueam.
Thanks, Crystal, and hi everyone. Norm is in a session with Fortis BC today. So he's out of the office, and we had Grace, our new housing manager. She was on the call, but then she had to leave because she had an event. She had another meeting at 2, so I would just be doing this on myself. Just touch. Can you give me permission to share my screen? Can you see my slides? Okay, perfect. Okay, so going to talk a little bit about the home renovation projects that we've been working on Musqueam. Couple of things about how we started the project and how we picked the measures, and then most of the presentation would be focused on those, and towards the end maybe talk about dealing with the contractors and the funding. So just an introduction about Musqueam. Musqueam is an urban community in southwest of, so the main reserve is on southwest of Vancouver, just south of the UBC campus, north of the airport. The current Musqueam Indian Reserve number 2 is a very small portion of their traditional territory, but most of our work happens in Musqueam Indian Reserve number 2. We have about 250 homes here. They're almost all single-family homes, and we have 7 public buildings. The challenges that Musqueam Housing Department, I think, is very similar to what other nations are facing. little or no data available for a lot of the homes in the past, and sufficient budget to implement all the measures that need to be implemented, high utility bills for the homeowners and the occupants, and then health and safety concerns in the homes. Because this presentation is about doing housing energy retrofits, I'm going to start with the main three questions that we have before starting any project, before starting to apply for any funding, or before starting to set aside budget for retrofits. The first question is, what measures are most beneficial or needed in the homes? Second question is, how can we secure funding to implement measures in as many homes as possible? And then how should measures be implemented in different phases, and then when? I try to put a lot of focus on collecting data from the homes, because I think that's the foundation that enables us to answer to all those three questions. So why I say we need data from the homes, first of all, it helps us identify maintenance needs, because we don't live in these homes. So most of the time we don't know what's going on, what elements of the home needs repair or maintenance or replacement. So data from the homes help us identify that. Data also helps us move from reactive maintenance to preventive maintenance. So we're not waiting for the hot water tank or the furnace to break and then replace it, but we can predict what's going to happen in that home in the next 1, 2, or 5 years, and then we can plan better for that. If we have the data from the homes, we can budget and plan our retrofit measures and projects, and we can also track the progress in the homes based on the measures that we're implementing, and especially it becomes very important when we're doing it in phases. And then data is very important when we are applying for funding, and I'm going to talk about that. It really strengthens our funding application. There are a couple of data collection tools that are available that we have been using in Musqueam. The first one is retrofit maintenance or renovation database for unreserved homes. So in Musqueam, we use this software called the Asset Planner. And then in that software, you can go back and look at anything that has been done in the homes in the past 10 years. So if we are looking to do projects, we can go look at the history of that house. We can see what has been going on in that house in the past 10 years. Has the windows been replaced? Has the heating system been replaced? When was the last time that the hot water tank was replaced? Are there any health and safety issues in that house? And that is really important to identify the homes that need the most help in terms of energy retrofits. Then we have our assessment tools. We have EnerGuide, and then we have the building condition assessment. They serve different purposes. EnerGuide is mostly focused on the energy assessment of the house. So it gives us an idea of how energy efficient the house is compared to other homes, compared to new house, and then what elements of that house needs to be replaced if you want to save the most amount of energy. Building condition assessment looks at all elements in the house. So in addition to, say, windows, doors, furnace, hot water tank, it also looks at elements like roofs or foundation. And that is also really helpful to have when we are trying to figure out which measures we want to implement in each house. And then the last one is feedback from community members and homeowners. I've found that that's very important to make sure that we're consulting with the homeowners and occupants on which measures that we are going to implement at large scale, and make sure that that is going to meet the needs of the community members, and it's not just something that we're coming up with without asking them. So these are couple of screenshots from the assessment tools and the tracking tools that we have. This one on the left is the asset management software that we have. So as you can see on the left, we have all kinds of maintenance costs and replacement projects: windows, roofs, fans, lighting, plumbing, air quality, electrical. And that not all of those might be focused on energy efficiency, but that's a very effective tool to not only keep track, but also identify the priorities. The screenshot in the middle is NA Guide assessment report that shows what they call energy efficiency roadmap. So they prioritize the measures that need to be implemented in the house to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, energy consumption. And then this one on the right is a building condition assessment that goes beyond energy efficiency, looks at all the elements of the house and estimates when those elements need to be replaced. So going back to that first question, what measures are most beneficial or needed? Different houses have different needs. I'm pretty sure in other nations, same as Musqueam, the homes have been built in different years and different phases. So the homes that have been built, let's say in the 60s, are very different from the homes that were built in the 80s, 90s, 2000, and then say recently. They have very different needs. Like a clear example is the homes that were built in the 60s. They all have ventilation issues. Most of those homes were built without any ventilation equipment. So you go to the house and the washroom, there's no ventilation. There's no hood fan in the kitchen. So right off the bat, I know if someone tells me, oh, this house, what we call it, first 40, which means the first 40 homes that were built on Musqueam is number 2. Right off the bat, I know there's ventilation and then mold problem in those homes. That is not a major issue on the newer homes, because newer homes, they have better building envelope and they have better ventilation equipment. So that is very important to know. Budget needs to be prioritized. We never have enough money to do everything we want to do. So we kind of have to pick the measures that are most needed. And then in the next few slides, I'm kind of going to point to what areas we're trying to spend the most money on. And again, there's so many things that could and need to be done in these homes, but the reality is that there's insufficient budget and there's so much we can do. So these pictures that I'm putting here are kind of the examples of the things that are more major in some of the homes. So say if you have a broken window, if you don't have ventilation, if you have broken hot water tank, those become priorities in the homes before even getting to more advanced measures. So in Musqueam, we try to break down the measures into 3 areas. There's building envelope, mechanical system, and then health and safety. Under building envelope, we have replacing windows and doors, insulation, mostly focused on attic insulation, and then crawl space / basement, if the house has crawl space or basement, and then air sealing. Mechanical systems is looking at space cooling or heating systems, and then hot water systems, and then health and safety is focused on ventilation, mold removal, and the drywall repair. I guess after a couple of projects, trial and error, this is what we have reached at Musqueam. What we do is a building envelope first. So for any house that we're trying to implement retrofits, we first look to see if there is a potential to upgrade the building envelope. And there's actually a couple of reasons for that. The first one is the building envelope elements have long lifetimes. The doors, windows, insulation, they're gonna be there for 25+ years. Actually, some of the windows that Musqueam homes have in the first 40, they have been there, I mean, they were put in 1967. So that's like 50, 60 years. So usually there should be 25, 30 years, but then they go way beyond that. So housing department is, if you have funding, if you have budget, let's spend it on something that is gonna stay there for a long time, because that's gonna have a huge impact. Unlike, let's say, hot water tank that is gonna only stay for 9 or 10 years. So that is one major reason that we're looking at building envelope first. The other thing is upgrading a building envelope reduces energy consumption and utility bills. So you're using less heat through your windows. You're reducing your draft. If you upgrade your installation, you're losing less heat through the crawl space or the attic. That's a no-brainer. Upgrading the envelope improves comfort. So for instance, that's what we see by window upgrade. So whenever we put in new windows, just cheaper glazed windows, all the occupants tell us that it makes their homes more comfortable, especially when you put it in the living room and the bedroom, because less draft, use less heat. And then occupants really like, the homeowners and occupants really like building envelope upgrades, especially windows and doors, really popular. Another thing that we try to address, and we have started to do kind of more and more of this, is health and safety measures. So if we do an assessment of the house and we see this condition that is very common in Muslim homes, so we can see if there's mold. So that these two pictures on the left, the washroom has a fan, but the fan is not working properly, so there's mold on the wall. And then the two pictures on the right is a house that there's not even a fan. The fan doesn't exist in the washroom, so you can already see that there's mold on the wall. So before doing anything in that house, we're going to address health and safety. So we're going to make sure that if the fan is not working properly, the fan is replaced. If there's no fan, we put in a new fan first. We address the mold. So we either remove the mold, the housing department removes the mold, or make sure that we tell the homeowner how to properly do it, remove the mold. And then in a lot of cases, we need to fix the drywall after installing the new fan. So make sure that we do that first, because again, health and safety is a priority before upgrading even the building envelope or mechanicals. Again, I think that is an issue with a lot of First Nation homes. Yeah, we have people from other nations that can talk about this, but again, Muslim homes that were built in the 60s, they don't have no ventilation. So like right there, we have 35 to 40 homes that have no ventilation. So that is a major project. And then no ventilation means high humidity, mold. With new bathroom fans, with new windows, we can address that to a certain degree, but there are just too many homes that needs those. So moving to the funding part, I think this is a challenge for a lot of nations. There are a couple of things that I think are very important when we are applying for funding. The first thing is we really need data to apply for funding. So it not only helps us identify what measures we need to apply funding for, but it also makes the application stronger. So if I put in an application that is supported by, let's say, 50 NI-GUIDE assessments, I believe that chances of that application getting approved is higher than without doing the assessment. So that's one thing. The other thing is we know for which measures we're applying funding for. So if we know that how many homes need building envelope, how many homes need new mechanical system, and that's very tough to estimate if we don't have any assessment. So that helps a lot. The other thing that I want to say is that it's always a good idea for the housing department to contribute some money to the funding program. I know a lot of these funding programs, they say they can cover 100% of the cost, but if the housing department can contribute 10 to 15%, that makes the application stronger, I believe, because then you can show that there's a commitment from the housing department to actually implement those measures. So that's kind of what I learned through applying for these fundings, that if you commit even 10%, that helps a lot. Are we addressing questions right now, or do you want to keep it? I have only a few slides left, so maybe we can.
Yeah, I think we can answer a question here, and then maybe I'm sorry to cut it a bit short, Isan, but if we can give some time to.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's okay. You can finish. Maybe you can answer my question in the next slide or two.
Sure. Okay. Then I think the other thing I wanted to say was there's grants and there are rebates. Grants are usually the funding programs that need a lot of planning, reporting, and filling application forms. And that's where those assessments and data collection become really useful. Rebates, the ones that we get after or even before doing a measure, whether you go through ICCP or IQP, they don't necessarily need an assessment, but for grant applications, they really need that data. Dealing with contractors, because I think Crystal asked me to talk about that too. There is the contracting services, the equipment they put in, the installation, and the cost varies significantly when it comes to any measure. And I know, so I learned that it's always good practice to get 3 or 4 quotes and then just hold on to those quotes. Just make sure that we are picking the contractor that provides the best service to the nation, not just relying on one contractor. I mean, I understand that Vancouver is a bit different from a lot of remote communities. Sorry, Musqueam is a bit different because we're in Lower Mainland, so we have access to many contractors. But I found that to be a good practice. For many rebate and incentive programs, it's essential to use registered contractors, especially if you go to income qualified program, to make sure that you will work with the contractors that are eligible under that program. And then it is important to know that sometimes the rebate program only covers a portion of the retrofit, the cost. They don't always cover 100%. So what I learned to do is if you get a quote from the contractors, send it to the program, whether it's IQP, ICCP, or the any other program, and make sure that it's eligible, and ask them how much of this quote they're going to cover before doing the work, because sometimes you do the work and then you don't want to be stuck in that situation that you realize it's not covered. So submit the quote first and make sure that it's covered, make sure it meets all the criteria, and then move on. Okay, last 2 slides, lessons learned. I think it's very important to start with low cost or no cost measures if you're doing community-wide projects. So starting with things that are easy to do or can be done by community members to introduce community members to energy efficiency programs, and then move on to more advanced measures. Data is essential for retrofit planning. That's what I was talking about in most of the presentation. It also helps us to be proactive rather than reactive. So being proactive, we have the flexibility to select energy efficient equipment. Example is a tankless water heater over a conventional water heater. Homes have different needs and homeowners have different preferences. That's very important to consider when you're planning for retrofits. Stacking the funding programs is usually available in most of the cases, and it's worth to investigate all available funding programs and ask the program if it can be stacked with other programs. Sometimes you never think that you can do that, but in most cases you can. It's always a good idea to ask before. Bundling homes together, especially when we are dealing with the contractors, is I think a very good idea. We can get better prices from the contractors if they know they're going to be doing 5 or 10 homes rather than 1 or 2 homes. You can get better prices, and then it's easier to schedule. And last one, really my personal opinion, it's easier to sell the retrofits as reducing utility bills and improving comfort issues rather than greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's easier to approach the homeowners and then the leadership, chief and council, if you're focusing on utility bills and health and safety, if you're getting funding from them or getting approval to apply for funding programs. Yeah, that's my last slide. Thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Ishan. My question is around the quote and the costs. We do bring in people to inspect these homes. A lot of times, again, I'm going to keep hitting this nail on the head. ISC is the one that approves these inspectors. And they come in and they just look at the areas that are visual. They don't think about what's behind the wall. And we have experienced carpenters that come in and have a look at it and say, yep, you know what, I agree, this needs to be replaced, but what's happening behind that wall? And then they start to rip the wall down, and then they see mold actually getting and crossing that border into the next room, or it's seeping into the floorboards, or you know, or. So these inspectors, they need to provide room for a quote that's not just a visual quote, but they should also have the means of somehow ripping out a piece of wall just to have a look at what's behind it.
Yeah.
Because that would impact the cost on a lot of these remodels. I call them remodels because that's basically what it is you're remodeling a whole room. Or but when it comes to mold is always an issue with a lot of First Nations communities because of the older homes, because of the energy efficiency of those homes. So, you know, it's difficult because I have, like I informed you earlier, I have 135 homes that are being overseen by 3 people. That's a capacity need. But when you think about those 3 people and the work that they have to do with 135 homes, people calling in, asking for some services, and then having to apply for services through ISK or other means, and then having to find a contractor, and you know, what really bogs down a lot of the work is it takes about 6 to 8 months for us to finally get approvals, you know, to start the work. You know, and by then the mold has spread, or it's starting to impact, because now here in my community I had an inspector come in from our health department because they were noticing some people were starting to suffer from chest issues or breathing issues. They thought it was COVID because the home had COVID. And here we are, you know, a year and a half later, the health finally goes in and checks the home, and they realize that there's lots of radon and mold in the home, and it's causing these people to have lung issues. You know, so thank God for Jordan's principal. You know, they're the ones that stepped up because the home had children in it. They stepped up and moved them into Williams Lake. You know, I can't say enough for them to stepping up and doing the work, but you know, now I have to find 25,000 to tear down the home, rebuild the foundation, basically build the home from scratch over mold that should have been dealt with 8 months ago. Right. So I think that the time frame really needs to be expedited in a way I think that would benefit the families.
Yeah, and kind of on that, so I wish Grace was here because she's the housing manager, so she's better insight. But Musqueam, we just hired another housing staff member to just do the assessments. People kind of realize how important it is. So yeah, I know, and I'm trying to shadow him and go and learn like how this is done. But yeah, he told me it's very difficult to do this, very time consuming. And yeah, for a lot of homes, we get the health department to do that assessment for us, especially when it comes to mold. And again, I know, like I look at the construction year, and if it's before 1970s, I know it there's mold at this point. Like I didn't know it before, but at this point, I see 1967. I know there's mold. There's very few cases that there hasn't been mold. So yeah, that is an issue. If the majority of the homes were built in the 1960s and the 1970s, it means you have significant mold issues. Even if you haven't done that assessment, we can just assume that there's, at least in Musqueam, it's like that.
Hey, Jessica, for sharing your knowledge, Isan. It's always nice to hear how detail oriented you are, and it is helpful for the nations to hear the success that Musqueam has had and will continue to have. Just thank you everybody for being here. We are 12 minutes over now, and I would like to say Gayasika, but well, if you could hang on for another like maybe 5 more minutes, we have Larissa here. I know we have discussed some heavier topics and the realities of where our communities are at, and I thank you for sharing the sentiments and I could feel that heartfelt passion of how you're moving your community forward. And by hearing the words that you put out there, I know it will come back, and we'll become closer with our partners in trying to bring the successes to our communities. So Larissa, thank you for your patience, and she is from Indigenous Clean Energy. And yeah, go ahead, Larissa.
Great, thank you. And thank you so much for everyone else who did presentations today. It was super informative. I really appreciate attending this event. I do think just because of the time, I am so amazed at how many people actually stayed this much longer. I did make a slide deck, but I'm thinking maybe instead of going through that and taking up too much more time, maybe I can send all the information that I was going to talk about to Crystal. But basically, in like a minute summary, Indigenous Clean Energy has a new program that's been put on by the Bringing It Home initiative. And this is it's called the Project Accelerator. And we just wanted to come on here to promote it because there's only 10 more days left in our application period. And I will be sure to send Crystal the slide deck I was going to share today, as well as the application page, which is on the Indigenous Clean Energy website. And that provides all the details relating to the application. And also on there is my email address. So if this is it's an initiative that is looking to improve housing for Indigenous communities. It's open to all Indigenous communities across Canada, as well as Indigenous housing organizations. And there is, again, a lot of details on the application page, and my email is there as well. So if you're able to take a look at it, whether if you want to see if it's something that's suitable for your own community or a housing organization, another community, please share this opportunity. And if it is something that you are interested in applying for, please send any questions to me. Again, I'll share my email, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up with that. Thank you.
Could you send me your information you're going to present?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I can just send Crystal the slide deck, as well as like a bunch of other links. So the link for the Indigenous Clean Energy website, the Bringing It Home program, and then on there you'll be able to read all about the Project Accelerator. I can put my email in the chat now, but if Crystal, maybe you're just able to forward that to everyone who attended today, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I can. So what I'm going to do is for next steps, I'll be doing a little summary of this session, along with sending you the Zoom link so that you'll be able to see the video and the slide deck that Larissa would have shared.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I do want to share all the information, but I do recognize we're already like 15 minutes over. And yeah, if anybody's interested, just in your own time, feel free to go through that, and any promotion would be awesome. We would really appreciate it, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh, Tootby, do you have a comment or question?
Well, I'm just looking forward to the slide deck. You know, I may have come across really brash here, but I think for the most part, the frustration that's being felt. You know, I am a rural remote community. The province doesn't think so, but we are. Just as a bit of a background, you know, homes that were built here were built by the lowest bidder. And we are in the midst of transition, but I've approached ISK and I've met with them multiple times, and I said, how are you going to replace 100 homes in the span of 10 years? How can you do that? And how are we going to be able to build on other reserves if there's no adequate water supply? You know, it's great that they have programs like this that they can start to manage and to try and find a future for First Nations communities. But to be honest, I don't have the land base to put another 100 homes up. You know, we were put on these reserves by Indian agents so that settlers can preempt our lands. Unfortunately, these reserves, you pull up your dictionary, you look at reserve in the dictionary, where you put things to die. You know, but we haven't died, we're still here. So there's a need to address that. And with reconciliation and the truth. You know, you heard our truth today, every one of you on this call. We're living in a septic system, for crying out loud. And they want us to build on it. And they're saying that you put together a feasibility study, we'll see what we can do. But that's 4 or 5 years down the road. I still have families that are living in a 3-bedroom unit that have 10 people in that unit. Overcrowding is an issue. Mold is an issue. All of these things are all because of the lack of space for First Nations people, for crying out loud. You know, and it's going to take a lot of heads to come together to find a solution for this. You know, and I thank you guys for the work that you're doing. But to really find a solution for this is to look at possibly engagement agreements with the province and the federal government, to engage them in finding a solution and listening to the truths of the First Nations people so that reconciliation can be accomplished. I've said this time and time again, you can't have reconciliation without the truth. And if you don't know the truth, how are you going to find reconciliation? I told you our truth today. I told you that we're living in a septic system here, and that we need to find a solution for that. And for me, the only solution is take my own source revenue and buy lands and go through this transfer agreement that probably going to take 10 years so that I can have those lands transferred to reserve lands so that I can have a better opportunity to build more homes. You know, that's a no-brainer solution for me. But at the same time, what do I do with this reserve land that I really can't do anything with? Right? Do I put in a new septic system that's going to probably cost $12 million, a septic field, proper drainage? There's lots of work that needs to get done here, and I'm just so frustrated because feasibility study after feasibility study, they keep coming back and they keep telling us, yes, you need a new system. Yes, you need a new system. But nobody's committed any funding to help us do that. You know, and when we have inspectors come in, they inspect the homes. It's great that they say, oh, this mold remediation is probably going to cost about $80,000. They put it down on a piece of paper. We send it to ISK. ISK flips it back and says, oh, we can only pay for 40% of that. And it's a home that they built, for crying out loud, by their lowest bidder. You know, so there needs to be something more there. I don't know whether it's fairness, or I don't know whether to call it passing the buck, or, you know, it's not our problem. All of this stuff, it's, you know, that's the truth that First Nations communities in rural and remote are having to deal with. You know, it's a truth. And you know what? There has to be a solution somewhere. I'm praying, I pray every night that there's a solution, but you know what? The only solution I can come across is why give all the funding to all of these other proponents or these other groups that think they're going to do the best for our community when it's our community that knows what's best for it. You know, I have someone that's been in housing for almost 20 plus years, and it just amazes me at the abuse that she can take, how thick her skin is from our own people. Right, so I just wanted to mention that, and you know, I apologize if I offended anybody on the call, but I just wanted people to know the truth that's out there that nobody ever speaks of. And I've approached this, I've done everything that I need to do, but still there's no real firm action happening, it seems. You know, we have engineers coming in from ISK. Yep, that needs to be done. Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. And then they go back to their office and we're just another number. You know, oh, you guys are 10th in the queue. We have this First Nations band that needs to deal with it as well, but they're in the queue before you. Well, what do we do for the next 10 years? Do we continue to put money into home that we know is we're going to be fixing up in another 3 or 4 years? Do we replace the septic system that we know is going to back up in another 5 or 6 years because of the saturation? You know, so that, you know, those are some of the questions that, you know, bigger questions, I know, but that's the reality for urban and remote communities, because they don't have the capacity, they don't have the heads that are on this call that can help me find a solution. You know, they don't know the ins and outs of the ISK system. You know what, I thought I did, but apparently there's a lot of red tape and a lot of hoops. And it just gets so frustrating. And you know what, again, I apologize if I offended anyone, but I had to tell you our truth, and now that you know our truth, hopefully the next call you're on, you can start to begin to find and help these rural and remote communities, because I'm not the only one. All right, so just again, thank you for bearing with me, thank you for your time, and wish you all safe travels.
Jessica, for your knowledge and wisdom and sharing what your community faces. And I'm sure it's not just your community, it's the other nations communities that are really, like you said, the rural and remote communities are suffering. Yes, Gayasika, for everybody for hanging on for another 25 minutes. And Gayasika, I will follow up with some of the action items. I know Sarah has an action item for you, Cookie, and the concerns that you have, and she'll be getting back to you. I appreciate everybody for hanging in here, and we'll hope to see you guys at the next information session. And hope everybody has a nice day. Okay, Asika.
Thanks,
Thank
Crystal.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Yeah.